Body language analysis is an ableist pseudoscience. No, I am not even slightly kidding. Stop me if you've heard this one before. You're browsing YouTube in some of the precious little free time you have, and a video titled something along the lines of "Body Language Expert Analyzes Interrogation Footage" pops up on your recommended. Or maybe it has an even more eye-catching title. Something like "Proof that this celebrity is lying to us." You click on it because that's a fascinating title, and maybe you're interested in the case or the celebrity in question. And before you can blink, you've been swept off into a world of subtle, unconscious cues and tells. The so-called body language experts will be quick to tell you that this movement absolutely means that thing. She looked to the side here, that means she's lying. See how he leans back? He is trying to distance himself and regain a position of power in the conversation. I'm not going to say I don't get why it may sound appealing. It's basically handing people a manual on mind reading. The problem is, firstly, it's pseudoscientific at best. On a base level, body language analysis is one of those things that is rife with hindsight and confirmation bias. When looking back at a situation, our brains are prone to convincing themselves that we always knew what the outcome was going to be, even in situations where we very much did not. Couple that with the human brain's love for picking out patterns, and you've got a recipe for disaster. The facts of the matter are that while yes, part of our communication with one another as a species is nonverbal, there are too many variables within each individual human to actually come to a consensus. How we move our bodies and express ourselves physically varies from culture to culture, and even between individual family groups within the same culture. Additionally, anyone who's ever had depression can tell you that it becomes distressingly easy to fake being okay. People can, in fact, lie with their bodies as well as their words, and anyone who is trying to push the narrative that you can always tell what someone's true intentions are by watching how they move is both promoting pseudoscience and tropes that are ultimately ableist. There is no universal body language. While we can make educated guesses, like perhaps the person who's sitting with shoulders slumped is feeling down about something, or how we might be able to tell someone is feeling tense, those are still only guesses based on personal biases. Everything, down to the culture we grow up in and the society around us, affects this. Ever heard of resting bitch face? That thing where women who are just wearing perfectly neutral expressions get perceived as upset, angry, combative, bitchy, just for not smiling all the time? That's societal bias bleeding into how people read the bodies of those around them. Take the fact that walking while black is something inherently worthy of suspicion in the eyes of some. These are both larger examples of why anyone trying to claim that they can tell you what someone else is thinking or what their motivations are just by looking at them is absolute hogwash. No one is ever free of bias, and most cases of body language analysis you'll find online these days is just someone looking back on a situation and justifying why we should all have known how it was going to end before it did. That's not saying you can't put effort into making your own presence calming or commanding or whatever you like, but that's old news, and any sufficiently good performer will be able to tell you how to do that. And that's not what we're talking about, is it? When we talk about body language analysis, it's almost never about how to make yourself seem more confident or commanding. That would be honestly fine. You'll get those kind of tips in almost any public speaking class. We're talking about reading others, and way too often it's presented with a kind of certainty that is honestly disturbing. As people, we might be able to tell that someone we're speaking to is possibly uncomfortable, However, that's never where our observation ends, because even if you think you're free of bias, you're not. Whenever you encounter someone, you will draw subconscious conclusions about them, and it's much more likely that you'll fit your observations to your existing assumptions than that you'll actually be able to perfectly intuit what is going on inside someone else's head. At any given moment, there's no way for us, as people who cannot read minds, to know why any particular person might be uncomfortable or nervous, even if we can tell that they are. Things only get worse when people try to connect specific motions to intentions. Looking up and right when recalling something means you're making it up, as one of the most blatant examples of this ridiculousness. Body language works in concord with spoken language, and just like how someone speaks with words, how they speak with their body is bound to personal context. Anyone attempting to glean anything from a person's body language first has to have context about the person, their family, and their cultural background. Then, if something they do deviates from their usual patterns, maybe we can talk about how that might mean something. But it's also important to remember that we do a lot of things with our bodies all of the time. A lot of it is going to just be noise, essentially. Okay, so maybe the stuff we see on YouTube and in the media is pseudoscience. Why am I saying it's ableist, though? Have you ever really thought about what the most commonly cited examples of body language are and what they supposedly mean? If you don't know or have forgotten, let me remind you of some. If someone crosses their arms, they're anxious or being dismissive of what you're saying. If they cross their legs, again, it's supposed to be dismissive. If someone's tapping their foot, they're either bored or nervous. If someone's blinking too fast, they're probably stressed about something, maybe even lying to you. If they don't blink enough, they're just plain creepy. If they're leaning up against something, they're bored or disinterested. If they're swaying, they're restless. How close someone sits to you is in direct correlation to how invested they are in your conversation. If someone's fidgeting, you're losing their focus. And of course, the very bane of my existence, if someone won't look you in the eye, they're lying. Or they perceive you as dominant. Pick whichever one suits you better in that moment. Now, let me run you through those again. This time with commentary from myself, someone with a diagnosis of autism with traits of ADD, who is also physically disabled. If someone crosses their arms, yeah, it could be self-soothing, but unless you know them really well, you have no way of knowing why they'd want to self-soothe in that moment. Regardless of what the situation is, though, I can almost guarantee you that assuming off the bat that it is meant to be dismissive or combative is going to be counterproductive to whatever conversation you're wanting to have. Crossed legs is one of those things that baffled me when I was looking these things up, because isn't that just a common way that women are taught to sit? Besides, it's more comfortable to sit for extended periods of time if you shift position every once in a while. I cannot possibly begin to guess how many times my sister has had to ask me to stop tapping my foot or jiggling my leg, because that movement is creating a ripple effect of movement in the car or the sofa or what have you, and it's bothering her. This isn't malicious on either side, by the way. It's a classic case of ND traits clashing. My leg doesn't tap because I'm nervous or bored. Most of the time, I'm just doing something and the tapping helps with concentration. Not blinking enough is a common media trope found side by side with the mentally ill serial killer. Blinking too much is just a weird thing to tie specific meaning to. They might be blinking back tears, or they might have dry eyes. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Maybe an eyelash got in their eye. If I'm leaning up against something, I'm resting because my joints are garbage and I like to let them take a break as often as humanly possible. If I'm swaying, I'm stimming. People have varying degrees of personal space needs. The fact that someone else's personal bubble might be bigger than yours isn't the end of the world, and you shouldn't get offended if someone wants more personal space than you. Fidgeting, as I hope we are all aware by now, can actually aid some people in concentration. If I'm toying with my ring or my necklace or a fidget spinner, because yes, I have one of those, you can laugh if you like, I am not actually paying less attention to you. Believe it or not, I'm paying better attention because I am fidgeting. And I thank any and all powers responsible that I was never in an environment as a kid that enforced quiet hands. And, of course, the eye contact. One thing I refuse to do, because I was never taught it as a child and I am not about to start now, is to force myself to look others in the eye. I never even got in the habit of faking it. This does not mean I am a liar, and it does not make me weak. Also, again, cultural differences. While in many Western countries it's considered impolite not to look people in the eyes, that is not, in fact, some kind of universal constant. The thing I particularly noticed whenever I was reading the articles on how to read body language is most of the assumptions they tell you to draw are very self-centered. Almost every single odd movement your conversation partner could make is a signal they're no longer interested in you, or they're being dismissive. And something about that just doesn't sit right. It feels, as I said, very self-centered to believe that every single motion a completely separate, autonomous human being from you is making in a conversation with you somehow has to do with you. So, in conclusion, if you want to watch body language experts tell you why we should all have known someone was a murderer before they had their fair trial, I mean, live your life, I suppose. My issue isn't exactly with the people who consume this content, so long as they realize it's best as entertainment and holds little actual value in learning how to communicate with people. But I do have an issue with the experts who present themselves as empirical measures of truth and spread the idea that it's possible, indeed even alright, to judge a stranger based on how closely their body movements align with normal. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, consider liking it and maybe subscribing. I will be back here Thursday after next. Bye!